Hello beauty bots and welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, welcome. My name's Faith. Please subscribe. If you do subscribe, comment below and let me know that you've subscribed and where you are viewing from so that I can give you a warm, proper hello. Today we are going to go through and read about a horrific stalking case that turned into basically a murder. So we're going to get into that a little bit. Also, I am going to be doing my hair. I'm getting set up for another video this afternoon. So I am using the Hask. So I'm going to be using this beauty. Also, there is an affiliate code in the bottom. This is like my favorite product right now for my hair because it does a lot as far as moisturizing. You can use it wet or dry. So I'm gonna go through and just read this story. Oh, and it smells so good. And we'll get on into it. Now, as always, my sources along with other social media links on my website at faithingandellis.com, all of that's going to be linked in my description box in the bottom. So if you have any questions there or you need more information, want more information, feel free to check that out. Any other fun bingeable content will be linked up here at the top, so you can check out our other dating horror stories, and we have a lot of other dating stuff that's going on. We also do a lot of fitness and nutrition. Today's story is titled, What Seemed Like a Horrific Stalking Case Was a Jealous Lover's Cover for Murder. And this is actually originally reported from ABC News. So, let's get into it. Dave Krupa watched his cell phone blow up with the dozens of text messages from his stalker. My favorite thing to do is stand outside and stare at you, one message read. Krupa, 36, was almost used to it by now. He would go on to receive tens of thousands of texts and emails like this over a 3-year period. The messages are rife with jealousy and rage at first. Then, over time, the tone changed from spiteful to threatening. I hate you so much that I want to drive a knife into your heart, read one message. I will destroy your life and take your happiness, read another. Krupa said he can't remember how many times he changed his phone number, and yet the messages kept coming. What do you do when somebody invades every space of your life, he said. They all appear to be from Carrie Farver, a woman he dated for only 2 weeks in Omaha, Nebraska. But no one had physically seen her for a long time. It was years after the harassment began that detectives uncovered a vindictive lover who had gone to extreme and deadly lengths to destroy her perceived rival. Author Leslie Rule was so fascinated by this story that she wrote a book about it called A Tangled Web. Rule's name might sound familiar as she is the daughter of legendary true crime writer Anne Rule, who wrote the classic The Stranger Beside Me about her friendship with Ted Bundy. Y'all know who Ted Bundy is, I'm sure. Krupa moved to Omaha in 2012 after taking a job managing an auto repair shop. At the time, he was separated from his longtime girlfriend, Amy Flora, with whom he'd had 2 children. It was his first time on his own in a while. I didn't know how to venture back into the dating pool, he said. I felt pretty rusty, so internet dating was the way to go. Krupa said he signed up for a couple of dating sites. The first person he met, one of them was a woman named Shanna Elizabeth Golar, who went by Liz. I thought Liz was very pretty. I was attracted to her right away, so then when we set up a date, he said. Golar told him that she was a single mother with 2 kids who were around the same age as his kids. By the 4th date, Krupa said their relationship escalated and they started having sex. But Krupa said he was also upfront with Golar, telling her that he wanted to continue seeing other women. About 6 months after meeting, Galar, Krupa said, an extremely attractive woman, walked into the auto shop. It was Carrie Farver, a single mom who had brought in her Ford Explorer for maintenance. When we looked at each other, there was a little spark, Krupa said. She's showing me something inside the vehicle, and we're standing there. We're very close, and there was some tension. By all accounts, Farver was vivacious and warm, according to friends and family. You noticed Carrie when she walked into her room, said her friend Amy Long. She had a laugh, she had a smile, she lit up her room. You couldn't help but to notice her. You were drawn to her. Krupa asked Farver out and said the two immediately hit it off on their first date, so he had invited her back to his apartment after dinner. As things were heating up, Krupa said Farver told him she didn't want anything serious. I felt like I had hit the jackpot with that, Krupa said. Sorry, there's a lot of K's and C's. But as she was leaving his apartment at the end of their date, Krupa said Farver walked right by Galar in the hallway. Galar had come by unannounced to pick up some things she had left there. Yikes. It was just a brief encounter, maybe 10 seconds or less, but this encounter would go on to have lasting ramifications for all three of them, said Jen Carpenter, the host of the So Dead podcast, which followed this case. Krupa was quickly taken with Farver when she was tasked with a big project at work. He offered to let her stay with him. Farver worked as a computer programmer, and her office was located around the corner from where Krupa lived, he said, whereas she lived nearly an hour away in Macedonia, Iowa. On the morning of November 13th, 2012, Krupa said he got ready for work, kissed Farver on the way out, and told her he would see her later that evening. Around mid-morning, Krupa said he got a strange text from her saying she wanted to move in together, which was very left field. We had already talked about that not happening. Krupa texted her back saying he wasn't interested. She responded almost immediately saying, "Fine. I hate you. I'm dating someone else. I don't want to see you anymore. Go away." Sorry, that's not funny. Lots of profanity, Krupa said. I didn't know what to think. I was blown away. When Krupa returned home that night, Farver was gone. Nearly 2 days passed before he said his phone started to blow up again with text in which Farver said, in part, "I hate you. You've ruined my life. You're a terrible person." At the moment, Krupa said he thought, "I don't need this. I dodged a bullet." Farver's mother, Nancy Rainey, says her daughter was diagnosed with depression in her late 20s after a few years after having her son Max, and that she was eventually diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Now, she had been seeing therapists and was on medication, Rainey said. There was a couple of times when she would stop taking the medication because she said, "Mom, I feel like I'm numb," which is a big problem with a lot of those medications. They just make you feel completely numb. By the time Farver was dating Krupa in 2012, Rainey had said her daughter was in a good place, working on her dream job in Omaha, and Max was thriving in high school. Around the time Krupa was receiving those intense text messages, Rainey said she too began receiving strange texts. One message claimed Farver had taken a new job in Kansas, which Rainey said totally threw me. She tried to get Farver on the phone, but said her daughter wouldn't call back, which was unusual. When Farver didn't show up on her half-brother's wedding day, Rainey reported her missing. Rainey said she told the police her daughter was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and that she was on medication. The police jumped on that and said, well, this kind of thing happens all the time. When somebody who's bipolar stops taking their meds, sometimes they can start some really erratic behavior, said Rule, who wrote A Tangled Web about the case. While that is true, I don't feel like it's something that you should just dismiss, right? Rainey said she couldn't get the police to take her plea serious. ABC News reached out to the Pottawatomie County Sheriff's Office for a comment on the initial stages of the investigation. In a statement, they said, the department takes all missing persons reports seriously, no matter the circumstances surrounding them. The available evidence during the initial investigation was inconclusive, but we did not give up, it added. Meanwhile, Krupa said he continued to receive hundreds of harassing text messages and emails from Farver. So can nobody track those? I mean, I will do what I can to make you suffer, one message said. Another said, we belong together, Dave. He said most of the messages focused on Galar, the woman Krupa had previously dated, and who crossed paths with Farver in Krupa's apartment building hallway. Galar told him she was also receiving harassing texts and emails. One day, Krupa said Galar called him saying her garage had been vandalized. Upon pulling into her garage, she found someone had written "whore from Dave" on the inside in spray paint, Krupa said. Galar reported the incident to Omaha police in late November 2012. As the weeks went by, Farver continued to miss more family events, including her own birthday, her son's 15th birthday, Thanksgiving, and even her father's funeral. Rainey was convinced that something was wrong. She said she was still getting texts from Farver and begged her daughter to call her so she could hear her voice, but she never did. She said Max also started getting messages from her saying she was going to Kansas and coming to get him, but she never showed up. Rainey said the text messages became mean, angry, saying I wasn't a good mother and that I was controlling. She noticed that oftentimes the texts would be full of grammatical and punctuation errors, as well as spelling mistakes, which she said was out of character for her daughter, who was a stickler for punctuation and spelling, which I find extremely interesting because I feel like that's one way you can legitimately tell if someone who's texting is the legitimate person, because you know, like your closest people, you know their text style. For Krupa, the harassment wasn't just over text and email. He was also being stalked. He said, one specific occasion, I was sitting in my lazy boy with my feet up, watching TV and trying to relax. And it's nighttime. I get a text saying, I see you. You're sitting in your chair with your feet propped up, wearing a blue shirt. And those things were true. One night on January 2013, almost 2 months after the harassment started, Krupa was returning home from work when he noticed a familiar vehicle in a nearby parking lot. As he got closer, he realized it was Farver's Ford Explorer. Having worked on the car, he knew it fairly well. So he said he took a photo of the license plate and sent it to Omaha police. When police searched the car, they were unable to find a single fingerprint on a mint container. They were only able to find a single fingerprint on a mint container. Sorry, guys. It didn't match Farver or anyone in the FBI's national database. Meanwhile, weeks turned into months and Rainey still hadn't found her daughter. One beacon of hope arrived 5 months after Farver disappeared, when Rainey says a man called her to tell her he'd seen Farver at a homeless shelter and that she wanted Rainey to pick her up. I was shaking. I thought, oh my God, we're going to bring her home. She's going to be okay, Rainey said. Rainey said that she raced over to the shelter and investigators met her there. But when they arrived, they learned Farver had never been there. It was such a letdown, and I was just devastated, Rainey said. I get this raising in my hopes, and then it's dashed again. I knew somebody was playing games here. 6 months into Farver's disappearance, Max decided to message his mother's Facebook account to see what would happen. She messaged back. It said, "Hey little man, how are you?" Carpenter said. He asked her to answer 3 questions to prove it was really her. What is his middle name? What was the name of their first dog? And what was his best friend's name? But she never responded. All the while, Krupa and Golar, who were still seeing each other on and off, were still receiving hostile, nasty text messages. It was actually extremely common for us to be hanging out on a couch, watching TV or something, and both of our phones would start blowing up with texts and emails from Carrie, Krupa said. At one point, Krupa said he got an email from Farver threatening to kill Golar and that it included a photo of a woman tied up in the trunk of a car. Krupa called Golar, who confirmed she was fine. Later, Krupa said Farver sent him a link to a fake obituary for Golar. Then, in August 2013, Golar's house caught fire, killing her family pets, including 2 dogs, a cat, and a snake. Fire investigators believed it was arson, and Golar told police she suspected Farver was the culprit. Krupa said he had become so paranoid by that point, he bought a gun, a 9mm Smith & Wesson pistol. Terrifying intrusions kept happening to him. At one point, the auto shop where Krupa worked was vandalized. In January 2014, Krupa was with his high school friend Heather Twett in his apartment when Twett said she watched his cell phone blow up with messages and then later heard someone jiggering the front door handle. While they were in bed that night, Twett said a brick was thrown through the window. Krupa's ex-girlfriend Amy Flora, the mother of his 2 children, had also received threatening messages from Farver. It wasn't just Dave and Liz. It was anyone in Dave's life, it seemed. Carrie had it out for, Carpenter said. By spring 2015, it had been 2.5 years since anyone had seen Farver, yet the harassment continued. Detectives Ryan Avis and Jim Dottie of the Pottawatomie County Sheriff's Office in Council Bluffs, Iowa, had never worked on the case, but they had heard about it in the office. They were so intrigued by Farver's mysterious disappearance that they volunteered to take it on. The 2 detectives decided to approach the case from different angles. Jim's going to work it like she's dead, and I'm going to work it like she's alive. I'm going to try to prove every which way I can that Carrie is still out there, and Jim is going to try and prove every which way that she is not, Avi said. So they started from the beginning, digging through the original case file. The detectives were aware of Farver's bipolar diagnosis, but they didn't think that had anything to do with her disappearance. Avis thought it was alarming that there hadn't been any activity in her checking account the entire time she'd been gone. It's not normal for adults to just up and leave and literally spend no money. No one's seen them and no one's heard their voice. It didn't make sense, Avis said. She had a good income, a good house. I had come to the conclusion that I could not prove she was actually alive. Dottie said the glaring detail that stuck out for him was Golar, who he said had never been involved in Farver's life until she went missing. All of a sudden, she's this focus of harassment. Her name was all over the reports. So to me, there was something with Liz. She definitely was a person of interest. The only forms of communication anyone had received from Farver were electronic. So Dottie and Avis asked their colleague, Anthony Cava, a digital forensics administrator at the Pottawatomie County Sheriff's Office, for help. Both Krupa and Golar had agreed to have the content of their phones downloaded in 2013 for the initial group of investigators. This content was included in the original case file, and Kava started connecting the dots. We knew these messages don't seem to really be coming from Carrie Farver, Kava said. Carrie, or the imposter who was pretending to be Carrie, sent Dave about 15,000 email messages over a 3-year span. It might have been upwards to 25,000 or 50,000 texts in all. Whoever was pretending to be Carrie got more and more sophisticated in what they were doing to hide their IP address, to try to hide their real identity, he added. The investigators found a photo of Farver's Ford Explorer in Galar's phone dump, which included metadata that showed the photo had been taken about a month before police recovered the vehicle. Somehow, Liz knew where Carrie's vehicle was before law enforcement even did, Dottie said. Another thing we found on the phone download was there were 6 calls made to Carrie's residence. It was using the *67 prefix to disguise the number, so Liz was calling Carrie 6 times. This didn't make sense to us because she said she'd only met Carrie one time passing through a hallway. The investigators also found a photo of a woman who had been tied up, which had been emailed to Krupa and determined it had been taken by Galar's phone. They also discovered a video recording that showed someone walking outside of Krupa's apartment. It had been uploaded to YouTube under Farver's name, but was tied to an IP address registered at Galar's house. In May 2015, Dodie and Avis went to interview Nancy Rainey, during which they said they believed her claims that her daughter was missing and that something had happened to her. Dottie said, "I just want you to know, I don't think that she left of her own free will." And that was the first time anybody of an authority position had told me that, she said. I honestly felt like something was going to happen now. During their meeting, Rainey provided investigators with another clue. She told them that after Farver disappeared in 2012, she received a text saying Farver had sold all her furniture and asked Rainey to let the buyer into the house to pick it up. As supposed proof of the sale, Rainey received a photo of a check for that furniture that was made out to Farver and signed by Shanna Galar. We knew Liz Galar's real name was Shauna, Dottie said. It was yet another connection between the two women who supposedly were strangers. Granted, that didn't give us any answers on what happened to Carrie, but we knew that Liz knew more than she was telling us. The investigators also matched the mysterious fingerprint found in Farver's car to Galar. As their investigation was underway, Krupa realized the pistol he had purchased for protection was missing. He reported it stolen to police. On December 4th, 2015, Dottie and Avis were at the Pottawatomie County Sheriff's Office when Galar walked in. Stunned to see her, they learned she was there to file a harassment complaint against Krupa's ex-girlfriend, Amy Flora. After Galar left, Avis drove over to her house to interview her, pretending it was about her complaint. She told Avis she now thought it was Flora who had been sending her threatening messages this whole time, not Farver. The investigator asked if he could download the contents of her phone so they could review the messages. Galar signed the consent form and turned it over. Stupid. Avis said he couldn't believe she agreed to it. Getting access to the information was an important moment in the investigation. During their conversation, Avis and Galar mentioned she knew Krupa's gun, which she correctly identified as a 9mm Smith & Wesson, was missing and thought Flora had stolen it. She realized that she probably shouldn't know any details about the gun, and then any further questions I asked about the gun, she was very vague, Avis said. In a bizarre twist, Galar called 911 the following day, claiming she had been shot in the leg while walking home alone at night in the Big Lake Park in Council Bluffs. Investigators said Galar at first claimed she didn't know who the culprit was. And later, she says she thought it was Flora. I find it highly suspicious that the day before she felt the need to tell me that Dave Krupa's gun had been stolen, and less than 24 hours later, she shot, Ava said. Yeah, us too. Police said that Flora was cleared that same evening. Okay, so meanwhile, Kava got to work sifting through the contents of Galar's cell phone after the second download. He discovered Galar had registered upwards of 20 or 30 fake email addresses, all of which had some variation of Farver's name. Kava also discovered that Galar was using an app which allowed her to schedule future messages. Yes, we can do this. It's easy. This explained how she could be with Krupa and both of their phones would get bombarded with messages. Y'all, this is not that difficult. You can do it with Verizon. You can do it with just regular messengers. It's not that hard. She was able to send messages pretending to be Carrie, and they would arrive while she was sitting on the couch next to Dave, Kava added. From Dave's point of view, Liz couldn't have sent it because she was sitting next to him the whole time. Kava estimated that Galar must have spent around 40 to 50 hours a week impersonating Farver. That's a full-time job. Lady, what are you doing? This seemed to be a full-time occupation for her, trying to stalk people and send them messages, he said. Dottie and Avis brought Galar in for an interview 2 weeks after she was shot. At the time, they said Galar kept pushing them to investigate Flora and had no idea she herself was their main suspect in Farver's disappearance. Dottie and Avis came up with a plan. They were going to tell Galar they believed her story, that Flora had shot her, and they wanted Galar's help to get Flora to incriminate herself. They asked Galar to reach out to Flora and see if she would tell her anything about what happened to Carrie Farver. Of course, the detectives knew Flora had nothing to do with Farver's disappearance or the threatening messages that had been sent for years. Their plan worked. They said Galar almost immediately fabricated emails she said were from Flora. We started receiving messages that she said were from Amy Flora, where Amy confesses to shooting Liz at Big Lake Park, Dottie said. He and Avis continued to press Galar to ask Flora who they knew to be Galar for details about Farver's death. A few days later, Galar did exactly that. They said she forwarded an email to them that had supposedly come from Flora, saying she had stabbed Farver 3 to 4 times and stuffed her body into a garbage bag. The details were bone-chilling because they were graphic, Dottie said. As time went on, the investigators said Galar grew increasingly upset that they hadn't arrested Flora. Dottie explained to her that he needed more information only the killer would know. Within hours, they said more confession emails came from Flora. The emails included that Farver had been stabbed to death in her own car. These emails gave us Carrie's vehicle as a crime scene, Dottie said. What we wanted to do was go back and look at that vehicle to determine if the crime happened there. This was the 3rd time police had searched Farver's car, but this time, Dottie says they pulled the fabric off the passenger seat. Once uncovered, they found a red stain determined to be Farver's blood. Because the murder most likely took place in Omaha, the Omaha Police Department had to be involved, and cold case homicide detective Dave Schneider joined the investigation. Detective Schneider brought Galar in for questioning and confronted her with the evidence Dottie, Avis, and Kava had gathered so far. The photos on her cell phone, the IP addresses traced back to her house, and the confession emails from Flora. Galar denied knowing anything and claimed that she didn't have internet service. But while she was being interrogated, Dottie and Avis had gotten a search warrant for her apartment. Inside, they found some of Farver's possessions, including a digital camera and a camcorder, which they believe Galar had stolen from Farver's home. On the camcorder, they found video of Farver talking about how someone had vandalized her car. It was time-stamped 2 days before she disappeared. On December 22nd of 2016, Galar was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. Douglas County Attorney Brenda Beadle, who prosecuted the case, said, "This was by far the most difficult case I've ever tried. Most homicides are dark. This one was bizarre to the point where it would take convincing to make somebody believe that it actually happened," she said. "There's no way someone would let their dog die in a fire that they started. There's no way that someone would shoot themselves in the femur." Not only was there no body, there was no crime scene. There was no murder weapon. There was no proof that she even died, Martin said. "We waived the jury trial to move it up so I could try this case, hopefully before they'd find a body." Then, a few months before the trial was set to begin in 2017, Krupa remembered he had a tablet in storage and turned it over to investigators. On the tablet, Kava discovered a micro SD memory card that had also been in Galar's phone around the time of the murder. The SD card had thousands of deleted images, all of which he was able to recover. I came to a photo that no one had seen before. I wasn't sure what I was looking at first, but it turned out to be a human foot with a tattoo. The tattoo was of the Chinese symbol for the word mother. It was the same one that Farver had on her foot. It was shocking, Kava said. "It made me realize that Liz Galar killed Carrie Farver and she's taking photos of the body." Boom. At trial, Beadle painted Galar as a diabolical and cruel woman who killed Farver and spent years violently harassing others. Galar's defense attorney argued that all the evidence from the state was circumstantial, that at one point Galar had been considered a victim in all of this, and Farver's body hadn't been found. In 2007, Judge Timothy Burns found Galar guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced her to life in prison. During his ruling, Burns said, "Carrie Farver did not voluntarily disappear and drop off of the face of the earth. Very sadly, she was murdered." In a statement to ABC News, the Omaha Police Department said, "The unusual nature of this case and the great lengths that Shauna Galar went to hide this homicide undoubtedly perplexed everyone involved." The successful investigation between the Omaha Police Department and the Pottawatomie County Sheriff Office, that word kills me, guys, resulted in the successful prosecution of Shanna Galar and brought to light an extreme level of deception that law enforcement rarely encounters. Galar remains at Nebraska Correctional Center for Women. To this day, she maintains her innocence and claims Farver's real killer is still out there. Author Leslie Rule said she received letters from Galar while she was behind bars, one of which said, "I will not stop fighting until I am set free and they find the right person." She obviously does not take responsibility for what happened, Rule said. "I want Liz to go away and never do this to anybody again," Krupa said. "Nancy and Carrie's son were foremost in my mind. They're unfortunately the ones that have to live with the repercussions." Krupa added that the investigators who solved the case, Dottie, Avis, Keva, they're all heroes. "Those guys, they mean the world to me. I can't thank them enough. They're my boys," Nancy Rainey said. The 3 investigators established a scholarship fund in Farver's name at the local community college. She had attended in hopes of associating something positive with her memory, Kava said. When asked how she wanted her daughter to be remembered, Rainey said as the fun-loving, talented, smart woman that she was. Carrie was only 37 years old when she died. If I could talk to Carrie right now, I'd say, I love you. I'm so glad that you are in my life. You have a beautiful son who's got a wonderful life coming, and I miss you terribly. Thank you guys for watching. I'll catch you next time. Bye.